They called it a rescue. We called it a receipt. Commander Eva Rostova stood on the command deck of the Human Confederation ship Reckoning. Her vessel was a testament to humanity's peculiar approach to galactic diplomacy, an angel of mercy and a federal auditor, rolled into one sleek gray hull. Before her, the main view screen showed the tranquil green and blue marble of Viridia. 12 million colonists lived there, farmers and engineers who had carved a life from a new world. They were the reason she was here. Floating between her ship and the planet was the problem, the Cathar Protectorate fleet. Their ships were ornate gilded things looking more like cathedrals than warships. They exuded a sense of sanctimonious power. The stakes were simple. The Cathar had saved Viridia from a stellar flare's aftermath, and now they had come to collect their payment. Rostova had read the initial demand, and it had made the cold vacuum of space feel warm by comparison. She intended to force a public inquiry, dragging their methods into the light of the Aurora Court's charter. Witness confirm their fleet's posture. Rostova said, her voice calm and measured. The ship's integrated AI was a silent presence, its emitters glowing a soft cyan from the ceiling panels. Witness. Posture is non-threatening, Commander. They maintain standard energy signatures for a diplomatic mission. Their communications, however, are broadcasting a continuous ledger of services rendered to the Viridian Colonial Authority. It is exhaustive. Rostova's jaw tightened. Exhaustive is one word for it. She turned to her legal officer, Lieutenant Thorne, who stood by a secondary console, his face grim. Thorne, have you found a single clause in their gratitude covenant that doesn't lead directly to indentured servitude? Thorne shook his head, pushing his glasses up his nose. No, Commander. It's a masterpiece of predatory law. Every act of aid from atmospheric filtering to nutrient solution delivery is assigned a gratitude value. That value is then compounded by a continuance tithe. They aren't asking for money. They're asking for generations of labor. Their law was a cage built from the language of kindness. A young family huddled in their small hydroponics farm on Viridia's surface. The father, Ben, watched the sky through the transparent dome, his arm around his wife, Ilara. Their daughter, Maya, pointed a small finger at the new star in the sky, the silver glint of the reckoning. Is that the one who will make the gold ships go away? She asked. Ilara hugged her tighter. We hope so, sweetie. We hope so. They had been so thankful when the Cathar arrived, their strange melodious voices promising stability after the flare had nearly wrecked their world. Now that gratitude felt like a chain being slowly tightened around their necks. Rostova now activated the primary channel. This is Commander Eva Rostova of the HCS Reckoning to the Cathar Delegation flagship. We are here to mediate the settlement of services rendered to the Viridian colony under the Interstellar Concordance Statute 12 Delta. A beat of silence, then a figure appeared on the screen. He was tall and slender, his skin the color of polished obsidian, and he wore elaborate flowing robes. This was Proctor Valerius. Commander Rostova Valerius began, his voice smooth as oil. We are pleased by your arrival. It is always a joy to see a junior race taking an interest in the proper conduct of galactic affairs. However, mediation is unnecessary. The people of Viridia have already agreed to our covenant of gratitude. He smiled, a slow, predatory curving of his thin lips. It was the smile of a creditor who owned the very air you breathe. A covenant signed under duress is not a covenant, Proctor. It's an extortion note. Rostova countered, her tone unwavering. The Viridian government has formally petitioned the Confederation for review. We are invoking our right to a public inquiry before a neutral arbiter. We will transmit the petition to the Aurora Court network now. Valerius's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. The Confederation oversteps. This is a local matter of reciprocal appreciation. Our assistance was profound. Is it so shocking that we expect profound gratitude in return? We don't measure gratitude in percentages of a population's total labor output for the next 3 generations, Proctor Rostova said flatly. The Inquirer is not a request. You do not negotiate with a virus. You demand it state its nature. She gestured to her communications officer. Transmit the petition. Log it on the public CradleNet. Let the entire sector see the terms. The proctor's eyes narrowed. This is an aggressive posture, Commander. You seek to shame us for our generosity. The Cathar do not respond well to such provocations. The veiled threat hung in the air between the two ships, thick and heavy. Witness. Commander. I am detecting a subtle shift in their energy signatures. A precharging of shield emitters. Probability of miscalculation on their part is rising to 17%. They did not expect us to force a public ledger event this quickly. They're used to their victims being isolated. Thorne murmured, his eyes fixed on the proctor's rigid face. They operate in the dark with contracts full of shadows. Rostova's gaze never left Valerius. We are not the ones posturing, Proctor. We are a ship of record here to ensure the law is seen, and the law requires light. A data point entered into a public record is a weapon no shield can stop. The formal petition blared across the sector-wide network, a notification pinging on every public terminal from this system to the Aurora Court itself. Valerius was trapped. To refuse the inquiry now would be an admission of guilt. To accept it meant exposing his people's methods to a galaxy that was on paper at least committed to free association. Very well, Commander Valerius said, his voice now stripped of its earlier warmth. It was cold, hard, and sharp. We will participate in your inquiry. Let the galaxy witness the depth of Viridian gratitude and the audacity of human interference. The screen went blank. Rostova took a slow breath. The first move was hers. But the board was now set, and the Cathar were masters of this game. Witness, she said, turning from the screen. Begin compiling every precedent related to non-monetary debt settlement and involuntary servitude. Cross-reference every ruling from the Aurora Court for the last 500 years. I want to know every loophole they have ever used. Witness. Already underway, Commander. I have also taken the liberty of analyzing the Cathar legal doctrine. Their entire system is predicated on the concept that any action can be assigned a quantifiable moral weight, which can then be leveraged as a debt. They call it the Great Balance. It sounds more like the Great Extortion, said Lieutenant Jin, her tactical officer, from her station. How do you argue with a culture that has weaponized the very idea of thankfulness? Rostova looked from the concerned faces of her crew to the image of Viridia, a fragile jewel hanging in the void. You don't argue, she replied, her voice low but clear. You teach. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by callers. The inquiry was to be held in a neutral data space, a virtual chamber projected between the two fleets. It was a corridor of pure information overseen by a remote arbiter from the Aurora Court, a dispassionate intelligence known only as Adjudicator 7. Rostova, Thorne, and a silent avatar for Witness represented the Confederation. Proctor Valerius stood alone for the Cathar, his image sharp and imposing. Representatives from the Viridian colonial government were present as observers, their faces drawn with anxiety. Valerius began, his voice once again cloaked in magnanimous reason. He detailed the Cathar's arrival, the catastrophic state of Viridia's atmosphere, the failing power grids, the imminent starvation. He presented data logs of Cathar ships tirelessly working, of their people providing aid. He painted a picture of selfless heroes. We gave them back their world, he concluded, his arms spread wide. We ask only for their gratitude. A small portion of their productivity, a tithe to honor the great balance. How can this be seen as unjust? He spoke of debt as if it were a holy vow. Thorn stepped forward to cross-examine. Proctor Valerius, your definition of gratitude is what is in question. Let us examine the terms. The covenant demands 30% of all agricultural and industrial output for a period of 100 standard years. Is this correct? It is a significant but fair reflection of the significance of our aid. Valerius replied smoothly. And this tithe, Thorn continued, his voice hardening, is to be collected not from the colonial government, but directly from individual family units, correct, in the form of labor hours. The debt is owed by the people we saved, so the people shall repay it. It is a direct and honest transaction, Valerius stated, unblinking. The truth he spoke was merely the surface of a deeper, darker lie. Thorn paused, letting the weight of that statement settle in the virtual chamber. Proctor, what happens if a family unit due to illness or other misfortune fails to meet its labor quota for a given cycle? A flicker of impatience crossed Valerius's face. The balance must be maintained. A temporary reassignment to a more focused work environment ensures their commitment does not waver. We provide tools to aid their focus. Tools, Thorn repeated. You are referring, I believe, to these. He signaled witness. An image appeared in the data space, a sleek metallic collar intricately engraved with Cathar script. It was elegant. It was also undeniably a restraint. The Cathar Gratitude Collar. It monitors the wearer's productivity, and if I understand your own technical manuals correctly, can administer a powerful neuroelectric stimulus to encourage compliance. Is that not its function? The chamber was silent. The Viridian observers stared in horror. They had been told the collars were merely administrative tracking devices. Valerius's composure finally cracked a hairline fracture in his perfect facade. It is a tool of compassionate guidance, a way to help them honor their sacred pledge. You humans with your chaotic moralities cannot comprehend the beauty of a perfectly balanced society. A pledge made at gunpoint is not a pledge. It is a surrender. Rostova watched her hands clasped behind her back. This was the moment. The first veil had been torn away. The word gratitude now sounded like a threat. The word tool now sounded like a weapon. She had forced him to say it out loud, in a public forum, on a permanent record. But it wasn't enough. The Cathar had survived such revelations before burying them in legal challenges and procedural delays. She needed more than just a moral victory. She needed to break the system itself. Adjudicator 7 Rostova said, her voice cutting through the tension. We request a full system audit of the aid provided by the Cathar Protectorate. We contend that the value assigned to their services has been artificially and maliciously inflated to create an inescapable debt. We wish to present our own accounting. Valerius scoffed. An audit? Your primitive human calculus cannot grasp the intricacies of our economy. Oh, I think it can. Rostova set a cold fire in her eyes. Our calculus is simple, Proctor. It is the calculus of cost. Let's count the true cost of your kindness, shall we? She wasn't just challenging a bill. She was declaring war on their entire philosophy. On Viridia, in a makeshift town hall, the colonial governor watched the inquiry on a public screen. He saw the image of the collar and felt a wave of nausea. He had been so desperate to save his people. He had signed the covenant without fully understanding its tendrils. He had trusted their smiles. He looked at the faces around him, farmers, technicians, teachers, and saw the same dawning horror. They had not been rescued. They had been purchased. The adjudicator, its synthesized voice devoid of emotion, ruled. An audit is a legitimate request under the Concordance. The Cathar Protectorate will grant the Confederation vessel access to the relevant service logs. The inquiry is recessed for one cycle pending this review. The virtual chamber dissolved. Back on the Reckoning's bridge, the mood was tense. They'll bury us in data, Thorn warned. They'll redact, encrypt, and obfuscate every file. We'll never find a smoking gun in that mountain of information. We don't need to. Rostova replied, her gaze distant. She was looking at the problem from a different angle. We're not looking for fraud in their numbers. We're going to challenge the numbers themselves. Witness you have the logs they provided to the Viridians correct. The ones detailing their energy expenditure, material deliveries, and man-hours. Witness. Correct, Commander. I have analyzed them. The figures are internally consistent, but appear to be inflated by a factor of approximately 3,000% when compared to Confederation efficiency standards for similar relief operations. Exactly, Rostova said. They're billing for a 5-star rescue when they provided a leaky lifeboat. But we can't just say that. We have to prove it. We have to make it undeniable. A single verifiable truth is worth more than 1,000 eloquent accusations. She turned to Jin. Tactical. What is the precise energy signature of their primary beam emitters, the ones they used for atmospheric ionization? Jin's fingers flew across her console. Standard Class 4 particle beam, Commander. Highly inefficient for that purpose. It's designed for cracking asteroid crusts, not delicate atmospheric work. Using it would be like using a sledgehammer for surgery. The waste energy alone would be enormous. A slow, dangerous smile touched Rostova's lips. That's what I was hoping you'd say. Their inefficiency is their weakness. They're proud. They believe their technology is superior in all respects. She looked at the AI's glowing emitter. Witness, you've found something in their legal code, haven't you? A pressure point. Witness. I have, Commander. A deep code precedent within Cathar jurisprudence rarely used but never rescinded. It is called the echo of imbalance. It states that if a debt is found to be based on a willful misrepresentation of value, the injured party is entitled to return the imbalance in kind. The original intent was to prevent merchants from selling faulty goods. The clause is archaic. They will not expect us to invoke it. Rostova's smile widened. Return the imbalance in kind. Mirror justice. Thorn, prepare the legal framework. Jin, I need you to work with engineering. I want you to calculate the exact amount of waste energy the Cathar fleet vented into this system while saving Viridia. Her crew did not need to ask the reason. They only needed to see the target. You want to bill them for their own pollution? Thorn asked, a look of dawning comprehension on his face. No, Rostova said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. I want to give it back. The recess was a period of frantic, silent work. The reckoning became a humming hive of calculation. Engineers, legal aides, and tactical analysts worked in shifts fueled by nutrient paste and a growing sense of righteous purpose. Witness coordinated the effort, its processing power dedicated to building a single perfect ledger. It was a document of pure accounting, every entry triple-checked, every energy unit tracked and verified. It was a weapon made of mathematics. On the other side of the void, the Cathar waited arrogant and secure. They transmitted fresh demands to the Viridian government, reminders of the coming tithe lists of the first generation of children who would be assigned to off-world labor camps, which they called gratitude academies. They were so confident in their law that they could not imagine it being turned against them. A teacher in a Viridian school gathered her young students. They were learning about the stars, but their eyes kept straying to the window, to the golden ships that promised a future of servitude. The teacher tried to keep her voice steady, but the children could hear the fear in it. "The Confederation is here now," she said, more to reassure herself than them. "They believe in different rules, fairer rules." One of the children, no older than 7, looked up. "But will our rules win?" The inquiry reconvened. The air in the virtual chamber was electric. Proctor Valerius looked even more self-assured than before, as if the recess had only strengthened his conviction. "Commander Rostova," he began, foregoing the adjudicator. "Have you completed your audit? Have you satisfied your human need to question the generosity of your betters?" "We have," Proctor Rostova replied, her voice ringing with clarity. "We have found no fault with your internal accounting. According to your own logs, every unit of energy you claim to have spent was in fact spent." A wave of relief washed over the Viridian observers. A corresponding look of triumph bloomed on Valerius's face. "Then you admit the legitimacy of our claim. The covenant of gratitude stands. The enemy's greatest weakness is the arrogance born of unchallenged power." "No," Rostova said. "We admit only that you used a sledgehammer to perform surgery, and now you've presented the patient with a bill for the hammer, the force of the swing, and the hole you left in the wall. We do not dispute your spending. We dispute your waste." She nodded to Thorn. Thorn stepped forward, his own confidence now absolute. "Adjudicator 7, Proctor Valerius. Under the Cathar's own legal precedent, the echo of imbalance, Statute 4.7 of their ancient commercial code, we hereby file a counterclaim. The Cathar Protectorate, in the course of its aid, filled this system with an unprecedented amount of waste energy, thermal pollution, and exotic particle contamination. This has caused measurable damage to Viridia's magnetosphere and will require decades of remediation." Valerius stared, momentarily speechless. He had not heard that statute invoked in centuries. "That is an obscure, irrelevant, a commercial footnote. All laws are relevant." "Proctor, or they should be stricken from the record," Rostova interjected. "Your law states that imbalance must be returned in kind. We have calculated the exact cost of the damage caused by your inefficiency. We have translated that cost back into the very energy you wasted. A debt is a debt. The ledger does not care whose name is at the top." She looked directly at the proctor, her eyes like chips of flint. "We find that you owe the people of Viridia a debt, a gratitude tithe, if you will, and we are here to collect." Witness. Commander the Proctor is signaling his fleet. They are raising their shields to full power. Their weapons ports are opening. Jin's voice was sharp in Rostova's ear, a private channel. "Commander, I have multiple weapon locks. They're targeting our engines and life support." Rostova's expression did not change. Her gaze remained locked on Valerius. "They won't fire. Firing now in the middle of a public inquiry would be a confession. They are bound by their own obsession with legal appearances. Their pride was the strongest cell in their own cage." "This is absurd," Valerius snarled, his composure finally shattering completely. "You cannot be serious. You intend to present us with a bill for waste heat." "We're not presenting you with a bill," Proctor Rostova said. She gave a silent command to her crew. A new window opened in the data space visible to everyone, including the adjudicator, and the entire sector watching on the cradle net. It was a ledger. It showed a single massive energy value, and next to it the words, "Debt owed by Cathar, Protectorate to Viridia. Payment due immediately." She turned her head slightly, her voice dropping to a command tone that resonated through the reckoning's bridge. "Witness. Execute. Open the ledger for all to see." A low hum began to build deep within the ship, the sound of massive capacitors charging. The exterior hull of the reckoning began to glow with a faint blue light. Mirror their gratitude. A brilliant, impossible light bloomed from the HCS reckoning. It was not the harsh, destructive glare of a weapon, but the clean, focused radiance of pure mathematics. It was a beam of coherent energy shaped and directed by the ship's vast mirror array, a system normally used for interstellar communication and stellar cartography. Now it was an instrument of law. The beam, a silent spear of cyan and silver, crossed the void and struck the lead Cathar vessel. It did not explode. There was no impact crater, no searing of the hull. Instead, the ship's ornate golden filigree began to glow its own shield, shimmering violently as it struggled to absorb the influx. Justice, when properly applied, is not a sword, but a perfectly balanced scale. On the bridge of the reckoning, the deck plates hummed with immense power. Mirror alignment is holding at 99.97%, Lieutenant Jin reported, her voice tight with concentration. Their primary shield is absorbing the load, but their heat sinks are already spiking. They're venting plasma just to stay stable. They are receiving exactly what they gave, Rostova said, her eyes fixed on the unfolding spectacle. Every wasted joule, every stray particle returned to sender with a receipt. Witness is the data stream embedded. Why? Witness. The energy itself is the ledger commander. Every quantum packet is encoded with the corresponding line item from our audit. They are not simply being hit with energy, they are being inundated with an itemized bill. The act is legally indivisible from the accounting that justifies it. Proctor Valerius watched from his own bridge, his face a mask of incandescent fury. Alarms blared around him. His technicians shouted incomprehensible reports about power surges and imminent core overloads. He was being audited with focused light. "This is an illegal act of war," he roared into the open channel to the inquiry. "You are firing on my vessel, we are not." Rostova's voice replied calm and clear from his comms panel. "We are remitting payment. Your own laws demand that imbalance be returned in kind. We are simply balancing the ledger you created." The law in their hands had been a club. In hers, it was a mirror. Adjudicator 7's synthesized voice cut through the chaos. The human commander's interpretation of the echo of imbalance statute is unconventional. However, it is not explicitly forbidden. The act is not destructive in its primary intent. It is a transfer of energy. I will allow it to continue pending review. Valerius felt a surge of cold dread. The adjudicator, a creature of pure logic and precedent, was letting this happen. He was being dismantled by his own legal system in front of the entire galaxy. His pride, the pride of the entire Cathar Protectorate, was being seared away by this upstart human and her ridiculous interpretation of an archaic clause. He had built a prison of contracts and had just discovered he was inside it. Divert the energy, Valerius commanded his engineers. Store it. If they wish to give us a gift, we will accept it. We will create a new debt, one they will spend millennia repaying. This was his gambit. The third escalation. He would absorb the payment and rebrand it as a donation, trapping Rostova in her own maneuver. On the reckoning, Thorne saw the move instantly. "Commander, he's trying to flip the debt. If they successfully store that energy, He'll argue it was a voluntary transfer, a gift. Witness Rostova asked, her gaze unwavering. Witness. His strategy is logical, but flawed. The energy is encoded. To store it, their systems must process the data stream embedded within it. They must, at a fundamental level, accept the receipt. The act of storing the energy is an acknowledgement of the debt it represents. The trap is sprung the moment they try to embrace it. Valerius's engineers fought to control the deluge. Their systems, designed for conquest and control, were now tasked with accepting a cripplingly large data file written in the language of physics. On the public Cradle net, the ledger updated in real time. The Cathar debt to Viridia was visibly shrinking with every second the beam remained active. But a new line item appeared flickering at the bottom of the screen. It was a calculation of the reckoning's own energy expenditure for the beam. A cost. Victory is never free. It is merely financed at a different rate. A family on Viridia watched the public feed their faces illuminated by the shifting numbers. The father Ben, who had felt the weight of generations of servitude settle on his shoulders, now felt a flicker of impossible hope. He pointed to the screen to the rapidly descending debt number. "Look, Maya," he whispered to his daughter. "They're making it count. They're making it all count." He didn't understand the physics or the law, but he understood the number. It was going down. Commander Jin's voice was strained. "Our mirror arrays are under immense thermal stress. The harmonic feedback is building. We can't maintain the beam for more than another 10 minutes before we risk a catastrophic cascade." This was the price. The reckoning was wounding itself to administer the cure. It was the first tangible cost of victory. Rostova did the cold math. 10 minutes. Was it enough? She looked at the Cathar flagship. It was glowing like a dying star, venting plumes of superheated plasma in a desperate attempt to survive. Valerius was still trying to outsmart the law, to twist this act of pure accounting into another form of leverage. He was a zealot, addicted to the power his system gave him. Addicts do not negotiate. They only seek another fix. "He won't break," Rostova said softly, to herself as much as her crew. "He will let his ship melt around him before he admits the flaw in his philosophy." She needed to change the equation. Thorn is there, a legal mechanism to compel a response from the debtor when payment is being actively delivered. Thorn's eyes lit up with understanding. Yes, Commercial Code Statute 12.1, Acknowledgement of Remittance. When a debt is being paid, the creditor is legally required to acknowledge the transfer. Failure to do so is considered a breach of contract, voiding the original agreement. It was another piece of dusty, forgotten law, another cog in the vast Cathar machine she was turning against its creators. Adjudicator 7 Rostova's voice was formal, precise. "We note for the record that Proctor Valerius has not acknowledged the remittance of the debt owed to Viridia. We formally request that he do so as required by his own commercial code. A simple payment received will suffice." The demand was a masterstroke of legal cruelty. It was simple, it was procedural, and it was utterly humiliating. To acknowledge the payment was to admit the legitimacy of the entire audit, the counterclaim, and the method of its delivery. It was to admit that his generosity had been a sham, his gratitude a weapon, and his legal supremacy an illusion. To refuse was to be in breach of his own sacred code, instantly voiding the covenant of gratitude he was fighting to protect. There was no escape, only two doors, each leading to his own defeat. On the Cathar bridge, Valerius stood frozen. The demand echoed in the sudden silence. His officers stared at him, their faces a mixture of fear and dawning comprehension. They were trapped. Their entire mission, their entire way of life had been cornered by a human who had read their instruction manual more carefully than they had. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. The arrogance that had been his armor for centuries was cracking, revealing the raw, violent fury beneath. "Never," he whispered. Then louder, a scream of pure, undiluted rage that tore through the comms. "Never." He lunged for his own weapons console, shoving his tactical officer aside. With a savage jab of his finger, he overrode the safety protocols and fired a single desperate shot. It was not a calculated military strike. It was a tantrum on a planetary scale. A bolt of raw, unshaped plasma erupted from the Cathar flagship, a lance of pure spite aimed directly at the HCS Reckoning. "Brace for impact," Jin yelled, but it was already too late. The plasma bolt, a physical manifestation of Valerius's fury, slammed into the Reckoning's forward hull. The ship shuddered violently, the lights flickering as emergency systems kicked in. The cyan glow of Witness's emitters blinked out for a terrifying second, before returning now a deep, angry red. The mirror beam, its delicate balance shattered by the impact, died with a final choked pulse. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. The final argument of a tyrant is always violence. Witness. Damage report. Forward mirror array is shattered. Main power conduit has been severed. Life support is failing on decks 7 through 9. We have casualties. The report was stark cold. It was the second tangible cost of victory written in blood and broken machinery. Rostova gripped her command chair, her knuckles white. The Cathar had fired. In the middle of a legal proceeding witnessed by the galaxy, he had fired. He had confessed. Adjudicator 7's voice filled the void, and for the first time it seemed to carry an inflection. It was the sound of a system passing an irrevocable judgment. The Cathar Protectorate has initiated an act of unprovoked violence against a vessel of the Human Confederation during a sanctioned public inquiry. This constitutes a terminal breach of the interstellar concordance. The covenant of gratitude with Viridia is hereby declared null and void. All claims by the Cathar Protectorate upon the Viridian colony are permanently rescinded. A new entry appeared on the public ledger, stark and final. A single line in blazing red letters. Precedent Lock 77 Gamma, the doctrine of compounding gratitude as a form of debt, is hereby declared predatory and is permanently outlawed. All existing covenants based on this doctrine are subject to immediate review and nullification. It was over. The Cathar's primary tool of empire, their entire method of expansion, had not just been defeated, it had been made illegal. The precedent would ripple across the galaxy, freeing dozens of other worlds from their gilded cages. On the Cathar bridge, a stunned silence reigned. Valerius stared at the screen at the judgment that had just dismantled his civilization's power. He had lost everything, not because he had been outfought, but because he had been outthought. He had been forced to break his own rules and in doing so had broken himself. His fleet, now legally and morally bankrupt, began a slow, silent retreat, their golden hulls seeming less like cathedrals and more like cheap, gaudy trinkets. They came as creditors and left as criminals. The bridge of the reckoning was a scene of controlled chaos. Medical teams were dispatched. Damage control crews worked frantically to seal hull breaches and restore power. Lieutenant Thorne leaned against a console, his face pale but a small, tired smile on his lips. "He fired," Thorne said almost in wonder. For all his talk of law and balance in the end, he just threw a rock. "It's what they always do," Rostova said, her voice heavy with fatigue. She walked to the main view screen, which now showed the Cathar fleet slinking away into the darkness of space. Viridia was safe. The price had been high, but the receipt had been paid in full. The air on the bridge still tasted of ozone and coolant fluid, a sharp chemical tang of a battle won. The low groan of stressed metal was a constant reminder of the cost. The deep red glow from the AI emitters cast long shadows, painting the crew in the color of their sacrifice. She looked at the image of her ship's own shattered mirror array, the delicate, intricate technology ruined perhaps forever. It had been a beautiful thing designed to seek out truth across the stars. It had died in the act of reflecting one ugly, undeniable truth back at its source. Gratitude is not a debt to be collected. It is a gift freely given, or it is nothing at all. We did not come here to be heroes or conquerors. We came here to be accountants, to balance a ledger that had been deliberately corrupted. We showed them the real math, and they showed us their real nature. The universe will remember which one was found wanting. The ledger is now balanced.